let's talk about the different methods, okay? And we're not coming at this like we tried it all, because we all three kind of have settled into our own areas. But can I just list them?
Sure.
And then if you feel like you know how to define it.
Sure.
Yeah? Okay, so unit studies, driving your whole homeschooling, classical method of educating, Charlotte Mason, and then you hear the phrase unschooling, right?
Which I still don't totally know what that means.
I think it's because people who unschool don't
want to define it.
Spend the time to define it. So unschooling, and those are the main ones. You know, I think there's mixtures of that so much.
School at home, like school in a box, or working through a tutorial.
Yes. Yeah. So let's start at the end here.
School
and
at home.
Define that. A tutorial method / school in a box. So when you say school in a box, the curriculum all comes to you.
Right. Which is a really easy way to do it.
Yes.
Call
on one hand.
Right. If it works for your child, but you might need a 3rd grade math and a 4th grade writing. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I guess I'm just thinking, like, you know, all of us have multiple age children. And when you get a box of curriculum, that is not necessarily going to say, okay, this year you're studying American history and everyone's studying American history. So you suddenly are having to facilitate, for lack of a better word. I mean, because I don't want to shortchange my friends who do it this way. I do think they're very invested in their children's education.
Oh, yeah.
I think they're very conscientious parents. I think they are certainly doing it for discipleship reasons. But in terms of actual content of education, you're looking for someone else to make those educational choices, and then you're just basically following it.
And so what you're saying,
I'm saying is it gets complicated if you have a lot of different ages and you're not necessarily all learning the same thing. Like, your kids are always going to be in a different math, for sure.
Yes,
like
no matter what.
Sure. You're always going to be in a different math, or maybe have 2 and the same. But, you know, you're probably always going to have different ability of readers, right? So you as a parent are working alongside those readers at a different level as well. It just helped me so much to have certain central things that were the same, which was usually literature and history.
Which can be time saving. So if you are doing school at home and you order a curriculum, you must be careful to make sure you have time to do that with each of your children who are a different age.
That you're going to have to be facilitating.
Right. If you only have 1 or 2, that might work.
That might not be a big deal.
But for me, I have had to combine subjects like literature, history, science, all of that.
Yes.
And find ways to do reading or spelling or math at the same time with a child or 2 at the table.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is not always easy.
It's not always easy.
Yeah.
But it's
and
fun.
we know people
sometimes.
It's worth it.
It is worth it. It's worth it.
And in our town, there's a lot of tutorials that you can go to,
Yes.
where you can go
Yes.
1 or 2 days.
Yes.
There was a Sally Clarkson tutorial that people
that's
went
still
to.
going.
There's all kinds of tutorials, and that's where you would another teacher would pick out the curriculum, and then you go in for a day
or two.
Bring your homework.
You bring your homework, and then the mother decides how that's parsed through the week and how you incorporate.
And certainly is helping the child. I mean, like, there is like some teaching that
going
she's
on.
doing.
Yes.
And making friends. It's a nice way to
the community.
see people.
It's a community.
I think kids who come from only child families, it's a great option.
Yeah.
Because I do think that's really tough to have an only child. And not have those siblings to break up the day.
Yeah.
Right. It can give the parent some time off too. That's a benefit.
Yes.
If the parent needs rest.
Although a lot of some of the
kids.
tutorials, the parents have to stay. Then you don't. But that's great too. Then they get to be with.
That would be more of a co-op,
community.
I guess.
A co-op, I think that you. Because the moms are all teaching it. They're not hiring people necessarily. It's usually the moms that are teaching in that co-op that you and I, or the tutorial you and I think are talking about. Where you stay.
Well, I'm thinking, there's probably 3 totally different kinds that I've seen.
Lots of options.
Lots of options. I'll speak quickly to unschooling. Unschooling is child-led learning. I think that it's where a parent sees a child who's interested in engineering or interested in botany or interested in cooking, and that child is leading the way. Those parents are going to have a bit of a different worldview, you know, in the sense that I don't always think my child is wise. I think the folly is bound up in the heart of a child.
Yeah.
And so I think that sometimes my kids' interests, they do drive us. Like, I know my son loves to build things, and I am going to gravitate toward those kind of things. But you know, a parent is more seen as a facilitator in unschooling.
One thing I was going to say, I remember what it was. I think for parents who maybe want to pull their kid, maybe they're really realizing they want to pull their kids out of school. Like maybe this time has shown them that they enjoy being home with their children, and they can. Why are they paying all that money if it's private education, or why is their child gone 8 hours a day when they can maybe be doing some of these things at home? I wonder if that tutorial, you know, a box of curriculum those things where you're more of a facilitator may be a good launching pad. I mean,
might be a
good place to start because
you
know, as you and I were talking about earlier, it did take me several years really to find my groove and you know, why are these the books that we have out? You know, why this was not like I read this and there was nothing else. I fumbled along for at least 2 or 3 years before I found my feet homeschooling. And I think people who maybe are in that situation, I had written down on some of my notes the question of avoidance. I think sometimes people make a decision to homeschool because they're avoiding this. And I don't necessarily think that's bad. I would just say, why are you wanting to avoid, if you like your child better when they're not around 30 other 8th graders or 8-year-olds,
what's behind that?
What's behind that? Yeah. What is different about you keeping them at home, and why would you think if you put them back in that it's going to be any different?
Yeah.
These books that we have out really help flesh out answers to some of those deeper questions. So,
right. I do think it's important to figure out why you want to homeschool, because that's going to inform all your decisions about curriculum, how you spend your time, how you discipline your children during the day, just what your whole homeschool looks like.
Well, like you were saying earlier, if you've got the reason you're homeschooling is so your child can focus 10 hours a day on sports, your homeschooling is going to look really different. And that's okay. I mean, like, again, this is not meant to be like a, you know, chiding. It's just we have our vision for homeschooling was intentional from the beginning, not necessarily a reaction to, or because I want my child to have more time to do thus and so.
But I think that's what is so great about homeschooling, because it is going to look so different.
For
as similar
everybody.
As our philosophy of education is, it looks very different in
each
all
of our
families.
homes. Yes.
Well, so let's take that and launch into a couple of the other methods.
So let's talk about classical. I met my husband, well, I didn't meet him that way, but he hired me to teach in a classical school, which is kind of a joke. Not that the school was a joke, but I knew very little about it, and I feel like I still know as little about it.
You know a lot.
No, I don't. I know a few things about it. It's a great education. Like, the body of information that your children are going to be working through is just, it's
very
worthy.
thorough.
Yes, and it's worthy of learning.
So the classical, great emphasis on the treasures of Western civilization that in the general education have just been washed away.
Yes.
Okay.
So preemptively here, I'm going to say, I think that that's what we also have focused on in our version of education, even though it has not been totally classical. So when I talk about that in methodology, so the methodology of classical education would be more memorization focused, emphasis on the trivium, which, if you don't know what that is, it's just different pedagogical stages of learning. So you and I as an educator, I don't disagree with that. You do memorize better when you're younger. You do get to an age where you really want to debate. You do get to an age where you are ready then to present that knowledge. And so I think those are important, but I think they can be incorporated, you know, in everybody's type of homeschooling differently. But classical is going to really structure it that way. So you are going to memorize. That knowledge is something that you will pull from in these other two stages. So maybe you're not learning about what you're memorizing. You're just learning
the facts.
The facts. so, you may be learning the elements,
of the periodic
table way before you're going to necessarily interact with them.
Yeah.
Or be able to understand.
Or be able to understand what they are. And then
a lot of Latin.
A lot of early grammar. But, the richness of what is studied is worth. And we were talking about...
And there's just a huge difference between what's happening in the classical school
huge.
than
Yes.
either government school
and
or even just
regular
general
Christian schools, for
very
sure.
different.
The approach is going to be different. The emphasis is going to be different. I think if that appeals to you, well-trained mind written by the Bowers, or is it just one? It's a mother-daughter. I think that Susan Wise Bauer predominantly did that, and I think she refers to recovering the lost tools of learning. So there's some harkening back to Dorothy Sayers. And
so let's stay in England and
let's
back.
Stay in England.
Go back some decades to Charlotte Mason.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about Charlotte Mason, Christina.
Charlotte Mason was an educator in England who emphasized a child being a person, building relationships with children. Living books is something I hear about a lot in her writing. Spreading a feast for children of beautiful ideas in music and art and nature and literature and history, and then just kind of learning alongside them. She emphasized short lessons, so her students would be finished by noon and then be out romping through the countryside the rest of the day.
When you say living books, tell me what you think that means.
They're
I always have a hard time
it's
defining
hard to put
that.
your finger on.
It really is.
In the living books, getting this concept early on is one of the biggest things in
Well, I think
in your homeschooling being alive.
You're setting your child's literary taste buds.
Right.
And so if they are early on being exposed to really wonderful storytelling, and even illustrations play hugely into that. I mean, you look at the little Beatrix Potter books. I mean, it's just like that's what you're looking for right there. Parents enjoy it, children enjoy it. You have
that's
beautiful
something.
art. So
Beautiful art.
Something that stood the test of time. Maybe?
Right. I think something that's well written and that just sparks something inside your child where their eyes light up. They want to talk about the story after you finish reading it, or they want to act it out and pretend.
Yes.
Or they keep thinking about it for a couple of days, or they want to read more and more. Yeah, I think something that just becomes part of your family's life because you all can enjoy it together, everybody at a different age. I don't know. That might be.
There's just a taste and a smell to it that
it's hard to define.
And on both sides of a living book, there's the ditch of just didactic or just trash, trite. There's so much to a young mom right now. This is just a side, because I feel like we're never going to get together, the three of us, and not talk about books or what a living book is, even if we're not saying that. But I will say that the literature that's coming out in the last 20 years, I mean, if Dorothy Sayers was sad in 1940, y'all, it's just, and if you're a mom that has trouble with it, like I've had a child that has been a lot slower to read, and if I just started throwing at him, and I hate to name names, but you could fill in the blank with 100 things that you really, like, when we were kids, you're like, oh, I can't believe that would be a title of a book that, teachers are like, yeah, you're wearing that book character at school. Right. I mean, like, it would have been shameful.
Well, here's what I always would hear, too, is, oh, but my child hates to read, but they love to read this. And I'm thinking, that's like saying, well, my child hates to eat vegetables, so all I feed him is sugar.
Right. But I'm glad he's eating.
Yeah, I'm just glad he's eating.
Well, you're like, he's going to die in 10 years. Like, so what we want.
Do you know that leads to my diabetes?
Okay, but so we want the life and the soul and the spirit of that child to be fed by these ideas. Okay, so the other ditch. Is it moralistic this? No. Can it handle that crap? No.
Yeah, the little sermonettes. Or even of us getting in the way and explaining, stopping and explaining. And what's the moral of the story?
Right.
I think you just
you read it
let them read the great book and let the child do with it what they will.
Yeah.
Really.
So Charlotte Mason, there's a lot there that has fed us. there are incredible blogs out there. There's wonderful literature if you got passionate about any of these and wanted to plow into classical, plow into Charlotte Mason. We're the last people you need to go to if you decide
there's a place you could plow into unschooling.
They're wonderful.
I'm sure there are resources out there.
And let me just say, can I just decide real quick before we move on from methods? Child-led learning. So when I said that and was like, ha ha ha, you know, I've spent tons of time training my children to be child-led players. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
That when our learning, of course learning never ends, but when they've completed the things that are for school, they are free as a bird to go and invent, make, play, mud, water, scissors, sewing, painting. So child-led learning is very, very important in our home and very highly valued.
Right. And that's a great thing about homeschooling, having the time. You know, if you're in school all day long, you don't have that much time to play unorganized things where you're in charge as a child to decide what you want to play and kind of process the learning that you've done in the morning, you know, the books that you've read, kind of think through them and, you know, talk about them and
let your imagination.
Yeah. So we talked, and then there's unit studies. So a unit study is a family that takes an idea like the American Revolution, or you could even take your garden.
Yeah.
And everything begins to revolve around that.
So I did this a lot in school.
Yes, you did.
They are interesting, and I think there's certain times that they even make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Like if you're applying it in that way, you know, for the kindergarten where you have a letter of the alphabet, and your letter of the alphabet might be your unit study. So you're going to study apples and the science of apples. We're going to look at the seeds and the part of the apple, and we might learn a Bible verse that goes with A. I mean, like where everything is just very simple and quickly makes those connections with a child.
Yeah.
But you know, I remember doing a unit study on ponds when I was teaching second grade. You know, and you've got all kinds of things that come out of that. And I'm not really sure what the long-term trajectory was for that being an emphasis in the curriculum.
I think, you know, when I used to teach in a school, there was wanting to tend toward unit studies, so everything was not fractured, right?
I was just going to say that. Now that I'm pulling that from the recesses of my mind, it was to have it not be disjointed.
Right. Yeah. Which, rather than saying we're going to do a little bit about ponds and a little bit of American history, and you know, just having more unity in your. So we do a bit of all of these things, right? And we'll talk about that more as time goes on.